Hello and welcome to the show. Today, um, I'm going to tell a story. This would be a story from, trying to think of one a long time ago. Um, I remember when I was, no, I'm not going to teach that one. When I was young, I lived in the suburbs in the DC area. My family was from rural Virginia, and both sides. And they had moved up to the big city because my dad got a job with the federal government. So I grew up there, and I always thought I was probably better and more educated and more sophisticated than the country bumpkins down in where my family was from. But every summer, and yeah, that's arrogant, but I remember thinking that. And every summer and on Christmas, every day on Christmas, every year on Christmas Day, and then every summer for lots of weekends, all of our vacations were down near our family's ancestral home. When I was two, my parents bought a lot and they got this tiny little wrecked trailer that survived a hurricane in North Carolina and built a shed attached to it. And that was our little home when we were there. And I thought it was great. And we walked around in the woods and there were holly trees everywhere. And I would step on the little holly leaves and they would prick my bare feet and it hurt like hell. And I hated holly trees. Still don't care for holly trees for that reason. And you don't see them in many places, but you do in Eastern Virginia. So that was my childhood. We were our piece of property was right on the water, navigable water. It led out to the Chesapeake Bay. My dad built a pier by hand and out with planks that were not evenly spaced, Excuse me. And they were not like modern piers that look so nice and neat. It was homemade, but it worked and it was pretty solid and it lasted a long time. And when we wanted something to drink or eat, there was this little teeny market with some gas pumps that were up the street. That was up the street, and we could walk up there. It was about half a mile, and they would sell it. This little gas station. They would sell some food, like some cereal and stuff, but it always had bugs in it. Why I don't know. But if you opened up a box of oatmeal, or it was always bugs in there. But box of cereal, always bugs. I mean, how they man? I guess they just never sold. How did the bugs get inside this box and get through the paper, the seal? I don't know, but they were in there. Guarantee it. Extra protein, I guess. But anyway, so we tended not to buy that, but we'd buy an ice cream. We'd buy a bottle of soda. I remember 2 liter bottles being 69, 79 cents for 2 liters and thought that was, a good price then. It's not much difference now a lot of times. It's amazing how that price hasn't changed that much. But, and then we'd walk back home barefoot, usually barefoot or with flip flops. My dad would usually have a tree swing, at least one or two. Our property was wooded, and every year we'd cut a few trees down and take the firewood home later. Maybe at Christmas when we came down, we'd pick up the firewood if we had some way to carry it, borrow somebody's truck or something. But slowly, every year, excuse me, it's late, we would slowly cut more and more trees, especially hollies, to clear the property a little bit at a time. It always was wooded. It stayed wooded, but we thinned it out quite a bit. So it was a nice property. It was the one place I remember more than anything from my childhood, even though I only spent weekends in the summer there. And we'd spend a week at a time sometimes. Whereas I spent almost all my other time in suburbia in one of the different homes. We lived in 3 different homes when I was young, 3 different places. We moved around a little bit. None of those places really left a big impression on me. I mean, I have memories of them, The one from when I was born till when I was 6 was just a small house. It's still there, hasn't changed. Um, in a in a fairly new, what was then a Levitt built community. So if you know anything about Levittown in Pennsylvania, it was a Levitt built community, and they're all the same. And that was in the early '60s. So houses close together, compact and simple, but straightforward and modern for their time. I remember we had a milk box out front for the milkman to bring the milk to, but there was no milkman because they had stopped delivering milk by then. And yet we always had that milk box and it just sat there. So apparently, since I was born 4 years after my parents moved there, so I'm pretty sure it was yeah. So within that 4 years, the milk people had gone out of business between 1960 and 64. The milkmen had disappeared. I guess you just bought your milk at the grocery store after that. Um, when I was 3 years old and still living there, I lived there till I was 6. So my parents lived there a total of 10 years. And they bought the house new in 1960, brand new. When I was 3 years old, so this would have been 1967, I overheard my parents talking. Now, my recollection was my mother was talking to my dad on the phone and he was at work. But according to my mother, they were both there. And that my mother said that she wanted some coffee from the store. Pretty sure it was coffee. And for some reason, my dad said, no, we'll get it later. We can't get it right now or something. And being someone, a kid who was enterprising and very much wanted to be of help, wanted to do something to prove that I could do something and contribute, I had this great idea. I knew how to go to the grocery store. I had gone with my mother many times. I was 3 years old now. I had seen the route and I knew how to get there. So I immediately went outside and started walking towards the grocery store, which was several miles away. I remember from that trip, that thought process. I remember that thought process and how excited I was that I could do this. I remember at one point walking along on a sidewalk and looking up at a pole on a corner. I was approaching an intersection, and these were streets in the neighborhood. There weren't any painted lines or anything on them, so they were relatively quiet streets. I looked up at the street sign. It was really tall, and there were different names of the streets on it that were way up in the air. And I got nervous for just a second. Do I turn here? Is this where I turn? And then I remember thinking, just relax. You know how to go. Just follow your instinct. And I did, and I turned right. And I don't remember anything else, but the rest of it was filled in by my parents, who were completely flipping out. They had everybody looking for me. They didn't know if I'd been kidnapped, what had happened. Apparently, I made it to the store. Somebody said that there was a carnival across the highway from there, and that I had possibly walked across the highway, gone to the carnival, spent some time in the carnival, then come back across the highway as a 3-year-old toddling along, walked to the grocery store, got a cart, walked around down the aisles of the store, put piled up groceries inside the cart, and then left the store without paying. And I was halfway down the parking lot when some neighbors of my parents saw me, and they were looking for me. Everybody was looking for me, and they recognized me. And apparently, when I saw them, I broke out crying. Now, my instinctive answer to why I broke out crying is, and I suspect this is because it's an ancient memory, I don't know, is I was disappointed because I wanted to surprise my parents. I really wanted to show up at home showing them, look what I can do. I didn't want somebody to interfere and halfway through the process. I wanted to show them I could do this by myself. You hear our little kids say, I can do this by myself. Well, that's what I wanted to prove. And I certainly did. Of course, I didn't pay for anything. And then after that, because I have no memory of that, and I'm sure that they had put all the stuff back, and they brought me home, and I was traumatized by this experience, not by the going out to the store, but by the reaction that my parents had. My mother, she just said she would never let me out of the house again, and pretty much she made that a mantra of her life. She never wanted to let me do anything after that, no matter how old I was. Understandable that a parent would flip out. Um, it did not have the effect that I intended. Instead of establishing myself as independent and self-reliant and able to contribute value to the group, I I felt like I was a prisoner after that, and I felt crushed and uh, just oppressed by an extremely over controlling mother. Um, so anyway, that's just a little story from my childhood, and it's neither here nor there, but it's a story. We all have our little stories. It's amazing that I can remember that. What's your earliest memory? I can remember first grade having a little girlfriend, believe it or not. Her name was Dawn, I'm pretty sure, and she had medium length blonde hair. Um, and yeah, we called each other girlfriend and boyfriend because you're first grade. So what do we know, right? Um, but this was much before then. I remember kids moving in down the street, and I was looking out the window at them, and I could see them rolling. There was like a hill in their front yard, and there was a little ditch in the front, like you have in suburbia in front of every house. There's a long ditch running down the road with driveways with pipes under them. And the kids were inside these boxes that had just been emptied, and they were rolling in the boxes down the hill into the ditch. And I think their next door neighbor was a good friend of mine, young boy, he was my age. And my dad would say, "Hey, go down there and play with them." And I was like, "No." I was scared to death. I was so shy. Now later, I did become friends with those kids, and we played together. I remember one Christmas, apparently, one or there was like two or three brothers of those kids. They got a present, and it was like a pretend pilot's station. It was a box that had stickers on it that looked like the controls of an airplane, and there was I think a steering wheel. It was orange, I think. But what really struck me was there was this headset, and I think it was just one ear covered, orange, and a springy thing that went around your head, and the ears on here, and then it had a wire that came down with a little like a microphone thing that was orange on the end that you would talk into, and it was, of course, it didn't work. It was just a play thing. I was absolutely gobsmacked by that thing. I mean, I thought that was the most fantastic present that anybody could get. And I really would have loved to have had that. I mean, I would have been thrilled to have that. Why I thought that headset was just so amazing, I don't know. But I always remember that. Um, I also remember one time when my other friend that lived next door to them, was a nice kid, went over to play, and we went out in the backyard, and he said, "Hey, look at my butthole." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Look at my butthole." And then he pulled down his pants and bent over and stuck his butt in the air. He said, "Come on, look." So I looked. I said, "Okay." I said, "Now show me yours." I said, "Okay." So I pulled down my pants and bent over, and he looked at my butthole, and then I pulled my pants up, and that was the end of that. Where the hell did that come from? You wonder if it was something from he learned it from his family or something. I don't know, or it was just a kid being curious. I don't know where the hell that came from. I always remember that. That was, I guess, was kids. I mean, I was 4 or 5, probably. Um, I remember when I was 6, and my parents put our house on the market, and there was a for sale sign in the front yard, and I was kind of skipping along, literally, with some other friends in tow, and we were heading towards my house, and there was the for sale sign, and I just kind of skipped around it, and they skipped with me around the sign, and I was kind of showing it off how excited I was, even though it was news to me that they were selling the house. Apparently, my dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they were sending him to a different office. This by now he was working for a contractor rather than for the government, and he was going to manage their new office. So it was a good deal for him. And but I just remember that image. I distinctly remember the roads, even though the roads were not very old. the roads had all cracked. The pavement had cracked, and somebody had come through and put like black tar or sealant or something along the cracks everywhere. And these cracks ran down the length of the road, and they ran horizontal, perpendicular to the length of the road. And they would be like sections, like cracks here, cracks there. And so there was these just random um, black, kind of lines about, I don't know, 4 inches wide or so, where the cracks were everywhere. So you look at the road and you'd see a lighter colored pavement, black pavement, so it was kind of grayish, and then these black lines all over it that made it look really old. It's just an image I remember really well. And I used to ride a lot my bike. I never had a big wheel, but all the other kids had, well, most of the other kids had big wheels. Big wheels were huge when I was a kid. And everybody was in a big wheel. I see them now and I'm like, big? They're like nothing. But I remember them being huge. And I had a bike that I got with training wheels. And then I took the training wheels. My dad took training wheels off and helped me learn. And that was a pretty cool bike. It was fast. I liked it. And we put like little plastic thingies on the wheel. It had these, what do you call these things that come off the center of the wheel? They're wires. Anyway, you would clip on these little things that looked like pieces of macaroni, and they were orange and green and yellow. And then when you rode the bike, they would go clickety, 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 as they slid back and forth on these little things back as your wheel spun. And at one point, I put a light. I really thought that was cool. A headlamp on my bike, so at night I could turn it on. Not that I was supposed to be out there at night, but I was always outside because that's what kids did. And riding my bike up and down the road, and I could do pretty fast on my bike. That's what I would do, up and down the road and hanging out with my friends. My elementary school was literally at the bottom of the street, so I mean you could walk to it. And the high school was at the top of the street and about a block or two over. So we were right between the elementary and the high schools, and it was like an unbelievably good location for a family. And my sisters went to the high school. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they had a junior high then. And I went to the elementary school, which is a nice little elementary school. At least I did for half a year. I'm not sure if I did kindergarten there or somewhere else. I did do kindergarten, but I don't know where it was. And it was a good community because it was planned and it was designed for young families, and it had everything that a young family could need. The grocery stores were close. I remember we had a McDonald's and we had a Hardee's, two brands that are still around. And we had a food fair as the grocery store, which went out of business not too long after that, I think. But it was just a big grocery store. Um, you know, those are some of my memories from that period of time of my life. Oh, Lord. I must be boring myself to death because I'm really yawning a lot. But anyway, that's just a story. And maybe I'll come up with some interesting stories, or something more interesting than that, and can tell you, and maybe entertain you a bit. And until then, it's coming now. The wave. See you around, folks. Bye.